From a distance, it stands as a timeless sentinel, an enduring symbol of human ingenuity and connection. The Brooklyn Bridge, an architectural marvel spanning the East River, has captivated generations. But beneath its grand arches and soaring cables lies a hidden history, a forgotten chapter written in sweat, blood, and unimaginable sacrifice. This wasn't just a feat of engineering, it was a crucible of human endurance, forging one of the most perilous occupations in recorded history. To build this dream, men descended into a world of darkness and immense pressure, facing an invisible killer that stalked their every breath. It's the 1870s, and New York City is a burgeoning metropolis, bursting with ambition. The vision to link Manhattan and Brooklyn, two bustling boroughs separated by the churning East River, seemed impossible. Yet, the brilliant engineer John Roebling conceived of a monumental suspension bridge. After his tragic death, his son, Washington Roebling, took up the mantle, driven by his father's dream and his own relentless pursuit of progress. But the challenge wasn't just building a bridge across the water, it was building its colossal foundations deep beneath it, a task that would require an entirely new breed of worker. To secure the bridge's massive towers, immense wooden structures called caissons, essentially giant, inverted boxes, were constructed. These engineering marvels were slowly sunk into the riverbed, creating an airtight working chamber. Compressed air was then pumped in, keeping water out and allowing men to excavate the river floor beneath the caisson's edge. The deeper they sank, the higher the air pressure became, enabling workers to dig through mud, sand, and rock, inch by grueling inch. This revolutionary technique made the bridge possible, but it also opened a gateway to unprecedented dangers. These were the Sandhogs, the men who burrowed into the earth, often in pitch darkness, enduring conditions few others could fathom. They were dock workers, farmers, immigrants seeking a better life, lured by the relatively high pay of a few dollars a day, a fortune for the time. But this fortune came at an unbearable cost. They accepted the profound risks not out of recklessness, but out of necessity, hope, and the sheer grit to provide for their families. They faced crushing pressure, suffocating heat, and the constant threat of instant disaster, all in the service of an engineering dream. For Michael O'Connell, a young Irish immigrant, his first day as a sandhog was a terrifying plunge into the unknown. The airlock chamber, a small iron cylinder, hissed shut around him. As compressed air rushed in, a searing pain shot through his ears, forcing him to swallow frantically to equalize the pressure. The metal walls vibrated with the roar of machinery above, and the smell of damp earth and stale air filled his nostrils. When the inner door finally opened, he stepped into a dimly lit, stifling chamber, where men toiled, their faces caked in mud, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and grim determination. The compressed air within the caisson was a double-edged sword. While it held back the river, it forced atmospheric pressure to unnerving levels, sometimes reaching over 4 atmospheres, or 60 pounds per square inch. This immense pressure had strange effects on the body. Voices sounded high-pitched and nasal, fire burned brighter, and the air itself felt heavy. While working, the men felt surprisingly strong, a high pressure suppressing fatigue. But the real danger wasn't felt in the caisson, it lay in the transition, the slow, agonizing ascent back to the world above, where an invisible predator awaited. The true terror for the Sandhogs was caisson disease, now known as decompression sickness, or the bends. It wasn't immediately obvious, often striking hours after a shift ended. Nitrogen, dissolved in the blood and tissues under high pressure, would form bubbles as the pressure decreased too rapidly. These bubbles could lodge anywhere: joints, muscles, the brain, spinal cord. The symptoms were horrific: excruciating joint pain, paralysis, seizures, and sometimes, instant death. With no understanding of its cause or cure, it was a mysterious plague that devastated families and filled hospitals with suffering men. Even Washington Roebling, the brilliant chief engineer, was not immune. Despite his careful supervision and attempts to improve safety, he himself pushed the limits, descending into the caissons countless times. That summer, he succumbed to a severe case of the bends. Paralysis gripped him, leaving him unable to visit the site again, confined to his bed, overlooking the construction through binoculars. His wife, Emily Warren Roebling, became his eyes and ears, carrying his instructions to the foreman. It was a profound and personal tragedy that underscored the job's indiscriminate danger. Beyond the insidious bends, the Sandhogs faced a litany of immediate, tangible threats. The constant roar of compressed air often made communication impossible, increasing the risk of accidents. Falling tools, dislodged rocks, and sudden shifts in the unstable riverbed were common. The caisson itself, a colossal wooden structure, was susceptible to leaks and structural stress, threatening to collapse at any moment. Every swing of the pickaxe, every shovel of muck, was a gamble with fate, and death was never more than a few feet away, lurking in the shadows of the pressurized chamber. One afternoon, Michael watched his friend, Thomas, emerge from the airlock. Thomas had been working alongside Michael for months, a steady, jovial presence. But that evening, Michael found him writhing in pain, clutching his stomach and joints, his face contorted in agony. The doctors, baffled, offered crude remedies, but nothing worked. By morning, Thomas was gone, another victim of the bends, leaving behind a young wife and 2 small children. Michael remembered Thomas's last words, a garbled plea for air. The tragedy hardened Michael's resolve, but also intensified his fear of the invisible demon. The fight against the East River was a relentless, minute-by-minute battle. Despite the compressed air, water inevitably found its way in, seeping through seams, bursting through cracks. Pumps ran constantly, struggling to keep the working chamber dry enough for excavation. A sudden breach could mean instant catastrophe, flooding the caisson and drowning every man trapped inside. The cold, dark water was a constant reminder of their precarious existence, a liquid tomb waiting to claim its next victims. Survival often came down to the speed of the pumps and the integrity of the timber walls. As the caissons sank deeper, another terrifying danger emerged: explosive gas pockets. Methane, trapped for millennia in the riverbed, could be released by the excavators. In the compressed, oxygen-rich environment of the caisson, a single spark from a pickaxe striking rock, or a faulty lamp, could ignite a catastrophic explosion. The confined space amplified the blast, turning the caisson into a deadly pressure cooker. Men lived with the constant fear that any moment, the very air they breathed could turn against them, erupting in a blinding flash and deafening roar, ending lives in an instant. The human cost of the Brooklyn Bridge's foundations was staggering. While official records often downplayed the casualties, estimates suggest that hundreds suffered from the bends, with many permanently crippled. At least 20, and possibly up to 30 lives, were directly lost within the caissons from various accidents, drownings, and explosions. But the true number of those who died shortly after leaving the caissons, or suffered lifelong debilitating conditions, likely runs into the hundreds. Each statistic represents a father, a son, a brother, whose ambition or desperation led them to this deadly work. Despite witnessing unspeakable horrors, Michael O'Connell continued his work. He saw men carried out, heard the desperate cries of those afflicted, but he returned each day to the caisson's humid, pressurized depths. Was it stubbornness? Desperation for the meager wage that fed his family? Or a deep-seated pride in contributing to something monumental? Perhaps it was a mixture of all, intertwined with the grim acceptance that this was simply the price of progress. He learned to listen to his body, to ascend slowly, hoping to outwit the invisible killer that had claimed so many of his comrades. Medical knowledge of the bends was virtually non-existent. Doctors tried everything from electric shocks and opium to alcohol and massage, all to no avail. The only true relief, and the eventual discovery of a treatment, came from observing that repressurizing a patient eased their symptoms. This led to the rudimentary hospital lock, a small recompression chamber. But these were rare, often used too late, and still poorly understood. For most Sandhogs, the onset of the bends meant a lingering, agonizing fate, or a swift, unforgiving end, with little hope of intervention. As the caissons neared bedrock, the work became even more dangerous. The pressure was at its peak, and the risk of explosion and collapse intensified. The men worked in smaller, more confined spaces, their bodies aching, their lungs burning. Each swing of the axe, each scoop of mud, brought them closer to their goal, but also deeper into the jaws of peril. They knew the bridge's success rested solely on their shoulders, on their willingness to push beyond human limits, to face down the very forces of nature and gravity, inches at a time, for weeks and months on end. Finally, after years of relentless digging, the caissons for both towers reached solid bedrock. The air was slowly released, the chambers filled with concrete, and the foundations of the Brooklyn Bridge were secured, standing firm against the river's immense power. It was a victory, but one soaked in untold suffering. The Sandhogs had laid the groundwork for an architectural marvel, but many carried the scars, visible and invisible, for the rest of their abbreviated lives. Some never recovered, their bodies permanently ravaged by the pressures of the deep. With the foundations complete, the visible structure of the bridge began to rise, a testament to what had been achieved beneath the waves. As the towers grew taller, then the cables were spun, the world marveled at the engineering genius. But the men above, the riggers and ironworkers, never forgot those who had toiled in the hellish depths below. The visible splendor of the bridge was only possible because of the invisible suffering, the silent battles fought and lost in the dark, compressed chambers where life and death hung in a fragile balance, every single day. When the Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, it was hailed as the eighth wonder of the world. Millions have crossed its span, marveling at its beauty and grandeur, largely unaware of the human tragedy that built its very foundations. The Sandhogs, those brave, desperate men, faded into history, their names mostly forgotten. Yet, their legacy endures not just in the colossal structure they helped create, but in the lessons learned about occupational safety and the invisible killers that lurk in the pursuit of progress. Their sacrifice paved the way for safer practices in future underwater constructions. Today, as the Brooklyn Bridge continues to stand firm, a testament to human ambition and engineering prowess, let us remember the Sandhogs. These men faced one of the most dangerous jobs in human history, accepting incredible risks with little understanding of the consequences, driven by the simple need to provide. Their story is a powerful reminder of the sacrifices often made in the name of progress, and a silent monument to the unyielding spirit of those who dared to build the impossible, even when the odds were stacked impossibly against them. The bridge stands, a beautiful, enduring ghost of their labor.